All right, Mr. Dempsey, I believe we're ready to get going. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Please take your seats.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day. I just want to verify with our tech group, we are streaming and everybody online is available and they can hear us. Is that accurate?
Absolutely, sir. We're live streaming, and the one board member who replied that wanted to join remotely is not going to be able to. So
okay.
We're live streaming.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciate everybody. Thank you for taking the time. I feel like you're a long ways away from me, but that's okay. I'll get through this. We sort of, here's what I wanted you to understand. There's real purpose behind trying to accomplish this and deliver it from this position, because at the end of the day, if you're interested in being a board member, you'll have to fill one of these 5 chairs. And my job as a superintendent is to make sure you're well informed, that you have all the information, but at the end of the day, you'll have to make your votes, right? I can't do that for you. It's not my role. And so we thought it was really important to understand that also a board meeting, a regular board meeting, are very formal. They're they're a business meeting. And so they're very formal, they're very structured. Work sessions are less formal. And if you've never participated in a work session, we typically we typically don't have them in this format. We'll do something different with the room. But they're less formal, and it gives you a little bit more of an opportunity to share ideas a little bit more open. But board meetings are very formal, and they're designed that way, and there's a purpose behind it. So I just want you to kind of be aware of that. And then I think it's neat to sort of pause for a second. If it's an interest of yours, envision yourself here, because at the end of the day, that's where it could be. So we wanted to just get started. Mr. Carmona helped me with this, and we did use some AI. And I'll point that out purposely, because we also wanted to make sure that there was no bias. We're trying to eliminate biases in there. And so some of this we utilized AI to try to help us a little bit in some of that. So get on board. I think that's a great title to this. And how could we, and I want you to consider yourself, how could you serve the communities that make up Gadsden ISD? And so I'll give you a little overview, purpose, and then today's goals and an election timeline. There's some very important deadlines in this that we'll talk about it's very critical that you meet those deadlines, okay? And we'll get those to you and make sure you have all the information. So first slide we have is why. What's the why? Why serve? Why, this is, let me promise you a few things. This will take time away from your family. This will probably actually take some resources of your own, and there's going to be a little stress with it sometimes. Not always, but sometimes. And so you got to ask yourself, why serve? And I think at the end of the day, what I would say, and again, I've served on many boards. I've never served as on a board of education for a K-12 public school. But at the end of the day, you get a great opportunity to really impact your community. And so this is where we utilized AI that said, what are the 3 reasons to become a board member? So this is none of Mr. Dempsey or Superintendent Dempsey or anyone else. This is what ChatGPT shared for us. So impact local education policy. Board members help shape policy that directly affects students, teachers, and families across the district. Your decisions can drive positive change in curriculum, school safety, equity, and student outcomes. Mr. Carmona, if you'll click that first link, I tried to put in what are some examples of things we've done in Gadsden that directly, impact and that were policy. So as examples, we recently passed a brand new graduation policy. I don't know if you're aware of that, but that is a direct impact on students. We have non-discrimination policies that are very important for our employees and students. Use of cell phones, hot topic that's been in the media nationwide, and we just reviewed that. Student discipline. This is student discipline is always a heated topic, and the board drives that through policy. And then we have had adjustments over the course of years, multiple adjustments on our policies associated with bans on tobacco, alcohol, and drugs on our campuses. And that's, trying to keep up with the times. The best example is tobacco with e-cigs, right? And those type of devices 10 years ago were not part of the conversation. Obviously, we have to update policy to do so. Could you bounce back, Mr. Carmona? Second good reason to run is represent your community's voice. As a board member, you serve as a bridge between the community and the school system. You ensure that local values, needs, and concerns are reflected in district priorities. Gadsden has some uniqueness to it. The reason why I think that's important is there's really 9 little communities that make up Gadsden. And some might argue even a few more. And the needs of Chaparral are not always the needs of Santa Teresa or Gadsden. So it's, right, you got to kind of adjust for that. And then as a board member, you have to act as one. And so it's a little tricky, right? And if you think about how do I do that? How do I represent my community, but also act together as a board? You have to think about that a little bit. Let me give you some examples that I had come up with. Examples of community voice. I will tell you, my first few years here, anytime I did a community survey, the very first thing that came out was technology. And so we have worked hard over 8 years to make big strides in that. The last time we did a community survey, it was the end of last year, didn't have a single thing on technology. So I think we made some big strides. You can always get better with technology. Technology always grows and has needs, but that's an example that the community was all about. We needed some change there. Covered playground equipment. I don't know if you're aware, but if you've had an elementary kiddo, a lot of our playground equipment during this time of year gets so hot, they can't play on it. And, you know, I don't know if we didn't realize that or how, but that came from a community concern, and we've done several structures over our playground equipment to make sure that we can allow our poor kiddos something to play on, you know, and so that was a big piece. Pre-K programs, expansion of pre-K, that has been something that came to me from day one and continues to come to me, that communities want to see opportunities for pre-K programs. And we've expanded our pre-K programs. In 8 years, we've more than doubled the number of pre-K classrooms. We'll open the doors on the newest pre-K center on the Riverside campus this semester. So, but that came from the community. That wasn't something that leadership came to. It came directly from the community. The district and school calendar. If you're not aware, every single year we have to pass a calendar. That has to be approved by the board. It's the first step of the budget process. We've seen in our local area some unique calendars. Our community, when we survey our community about that calendar, what I can tell you in the last 8 years that we've done that, they want a very traditional calendar. And that has been across the board on that. And so that drives that piece of it. And every year the board has to approve that. And then our bilingual program. That has been something that's come through the community in certain pockets, but you'll see, you can easily see the growth of our bilingual program. One example is the number of bilingual seals that our students have received at graduation. And I think last year was a high number. Ms. Terizona has worked super hard in her department, and I think over 200 students graduated with their bilingual seal, which was the largest in history of the district. So those are some examples. Can you jump back there for me? And then support student success. Your role helps ensure every child has access to high quality education. This is a direct way to serve future generations by supporting academic excellence, inclusion, and opportunity. In leadership, we say this a lot, but I think it will help anyone in a board member role. Yeah, you can go ahead and go to that slide, Mr. Carmona. We have to keep the main thing the main thing. And at the end of the day, the main thing is educating kids. There's a lot of things we do here, and there's a lot of good, important things we do. But at the end of the day, if students are not receiving a improved and better education, we're not doing our job, in my opinion. And some examples. So last year, and actually the year before that, for the last 3 years, Gadsden has posted the highest graduation rate in district history. And I anticipate that will happen again this year. And it's about 10 percentage points higher than the state average. We'll see increased proficiency rates, increased number of bilingual seals, I mentioned that, expanded advanced placement opportunities. So AP courses in high schools have expanded. This year, you're going to get to see in a few months that we now have a significant increase in the number of students passing AP exams. That's very important, okay? And then, of course, expanded CTE pathways. And that becomes, part of those opportunities for students when they get to secondary of what do I want to do with life? Where do I want to go? And what kind of things can I help get a head start on that? And those are like biomedical pathways. We have a great welding pathway. Gadsden High School has the Ag FFA pathway. And so those pieces of it are really important to us. So you want to bounce back to the previous one? So you go to the next slide, Mr. Carmona. And again, this is ChatGPT, so I don't want anybody to get upset with me. Here's some reasons probably it's not a great idea to become a board member. And I didn't want to give examples of these, so I want to stay away from push for a personal or a single issue agenda. What happens, this happens to all of us, but we can all are guilty at some level of having our own agenda. We'd kind of be foolish to say we don't, but to say that I'm here to, and whatever you want to fill that sentence in with, if I'm here to get rid of Mr. Dempsey, that's that single item agenda that, newsflash, you're going to have to get 2 more people to join you in that. And that's not really probably the most important thing for our kids in Gadsden. It's usually, if I'm being honest, I don't like the football coach at some school. Well, if that's why you're running, man, you got 19 meetings, depending on your if you're a new board member, 10 hours of training minimum, 5 hours for a veteran. You're going to be giving a lot of time away just because you're upset at a football coach, right? And so please, just think about those. Supervisor controls school staff. Let me help you here. Daily operations, that's the superintendent's role. That's my lane. I use my leadership team. If you ever, as a board member, have questions about it, I do believe I have a responsibility to provide you answers. However, if as a board member, especially as a single board member, if your goal is to guide me in making those decisions, we're pretty quickly not going to agree, because that's, as a board member, that's not your role. Now, if it has to do with policy, that makes a lot of sense. It says, I had an employee come to me and they're concerned about their safety in a certain area. Well, the question should be, what's our policy on that? Do we have a policy on it? What's that look like? And maybe something was brought to you that's really important that we need to work on. And that makes all the sense in the world, but just be real careful of that area. And then willingness to collaborate. So I will say that I've seen the experience of individuals sometimes who come on a board and they don't recognize prior to getting on the board that there's 5 members here, and I, as a superintendent, have to respond to hopefully a unified 5, or 4 if there's 1 out, or 3 if there's 2 out. And so if it's a split board on a decision, I have to go with the majority. And so understanding how do you work in connection with your fellow board members, and that does not always mean that you're going to agree. Without a doubt, we're going to get in situations that we disagree. We want to do that respectfully, and at the end of the day, if we're on the side, and it's happened to me as a superintendent, I may make a recommendation to the board, and they choose to not follow it. Well, that's their right as an elected board to do so. And I have to let that go and move forward and implement what the board is requesting me to do. So just kind of keep that in mind, that it's kind of like a clock with all those gears that have to work together. And if one of those gears isn't working well together, the whole clock can stop. So you got to be thoughtful about that. Next slide. I'll try to talk a little bit about the specific role of a board member, and there'll be some overlap in this. And one of the examples I try to use, you think of a track where you have track runners, and there's lanes for each one. So if everybody if everybody tries to run in lane 1, we're going to probably get all congested and kick each other, and someone's going to fall, and it gets a little, it's not a pretty race. But if I get people that need one person lane 1, one person lane 2, one person lane 3, man, we can really make this thing work really well if we all stay in those spots. And so this might help a little bit understanding that. I mentioned governance versus management. Daily operations and management, that's really my house. Those are the things that I am tasked with doing. What helps me considerably is when a board member comes to me and says, Mr. Dempsey, I'm hearing about this and I'm concerned. well, gosh, that's my job to figure out what's going on there. And then I have a responsibility to report back. Typically, I'm going to report back to the entire board that says, well, this board member brought this to me. I want to make sure all of you are aware that this is what I've discovered, and this is the information that I know about at this point. This is maybe how I'm going to handle it. And that's an example of how governance and management can work together. Policy setting, budgeting, superintendent evaluation. Those really are the three main tasks of a board. Again, you're gonna set policy. You're gonna approve the budget. So let's talk about that for just a quick second. When we say approve the budget, notice I'm using the word approve. The budget is designed by an entire leadership team. And that leadership team brings the budget to the board. The board then can act on it and takes action. Where this really works well is if the board sees needs within the community and they get those needs, they articulate those needs to myself and our leadership team, then we can reflect those needs within the budget. Now, I say that because it's important because it's timing. We start budget, I'm afraid to tell you that we've actually already started budget for the next 2 or 3 years. But typically, this is going to be a unique budget cycle. Typically about November, we got to start working on this thing. And we really have to have our stuff in place. So if a board member is coming to me in April and says, hey, I found out about this community need, I'm going to say, that's terrific. Let's get it worked out. We'll work on reflecting in the next budget because it won't make this one, right? So you just got to understand that, please, 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 if you see a need in the community as a board member, bring it to me as early as you possibly can. And that's not anything on you. You can only, when people bring things to you, it's when they bring it to you. The one thing to remind them is there's a budget cycle, and we have to try to hit that budget cycle at the right time, okay? So I mentioned time commitment and expectations. I put a link there of all the board meetings that are currently scheduled. There's 19 regular board meetings scheduled between now and June 2026. So there's, as a board member, and I'm not saying, I mean, nobody would expect 100%, but pretty close, right? Because we do expect kids to come to school a lot. We set the message when we prioritize our commitments to kids too. That is not included. What I didn't include there is training. So there's training conferences that the New Mexico School Boards Association provides. I'm actually working with a vendor, and I think I'm close to this. I might be able to start providing some training locally because sometimes that travel is hard on everybody. It depends on your role and job. You may not be able to pull that travel off because usually it's like a Thursday, Friday, Saturday. That gets really hard with some positions. And so I think there's going to be a mechanism that we may be able to utilize. And then this is a real important piece for Gadsden. So I'm just going to, I think a lot of people here are from Gadsden, understand Gadsden. Gadsden is a very tight-knit community. I've been so blessed to be a part of it. Being at graduation ceremonies is very important to this community. So I share that just so you know that at some level is an expectation that's set by the community. And so being there, it's typically the last weekend in May. So that's in conjunction with a holiday. It's again this year scheduled for that same weekend. I believe that's purposely done so our families can enjoy extra family time with their graduates. So it is, maybe you might argue, a little inconvenient for some of us, but we're here to serve our community and our kids. And so I like it, if I'm being honest with you, as an administrator, because I think our families get to really utilize and celebrate that opportunity. Those ceremonies, aside from the pandemic, which we did things that I still maybe have some PTSD from, we have them at the UTEP campus, and they are a beautiful ceremony in the Don Haskins Center. We really work hard to honor our kids and the effort they've made. So just keep those in mind, and if this is something you want to do, please, please, please get those things on your calendar so that you don't have those issues on. Legal and ethical responsibilities. So there are some pretty significant legal and ethical responsibilities associated with being a board member. They begin with what you're going to hear as long as you're on a board. If you go to the next slide, Mr. Carmona. The Open Meetings Act. These are based on New Mexico sunshine laws, and they require us to operate with a level of transparency that is incredibly high. And so there are very specific rules around the Open Meetings Act. For example, I can't just randomly call a board meeting, bring a quorum of the board together without notifying the public. I have to have a notice 10 days before that meeting for a regular meeting. 72 hours prior to that meeting, I have to have an agenda posted. And anything outside of that could be a violation of the Open Meetings Act. There are only certain topics we can go into executive session on. And anything, there'll be a comment statement made that you can make no decisions in executive session. There's a caveat to that. The board is charged with any property sale or purchase, and that is something where that's the only one of the only exceptions where you can make a decision in executive session. It's about property sale. Other than that, there's almost no reason, no exception to make a decision in executive. So you have executive sessions, you come out, typically no decision was made, and any decisions you have to make, again, you have to do it in this open setting with a proper notice and agenda that has been notified, the public has been notified of. So those are very important. Most of the trainings we attend will have a session on Open Meetings Act. Okay, it's a very important concept. Conflict of interest and ethics. So conflict of interest, this is an example, this is where as a board member, it gets difficult in our small communities sometimes. And let me give you a great example that I had at a previous district. I had a board member that was an employee of a propane company. And every year we did an RFP for propane in that district. It was very important. At the beginning of every year, that employee and board member would complete a form called conflict of interest. He's publicly stating in an open meeting, I potentially have a conflict of interest. Anything associated with an RFP for propane, I will recuse myself from that vote. And see, that's how you eliminate a conflict of interest. You acknowledge it. And it's not just a conflict of interest, it's a potential conflict of interest. So if you have something that potentially could, in that example, if that propane company financially gains a contract by pricing or something, he has a financial gain in that. And that's not ethical, right? And so that's why he recuses himself from that vote. So any decision you make as a board member that benefits financially you, your spouse, your family, you have a potential conflict there, and I would strongly encourage you to look at that policy and declare it. The goal of the policy is just declare it publicly, and then everybody knows, and we're not trying to be hidden. That's that level of transparency I'm trying to explain to you. It's a very high standard for a school board. And then you have some ethical responsibilities as well. And those are ones that you want to review and make sure you understand where that lane is. I talked about that lane. That's where those ethical responsibilities, you want to pay attention to those. You're going to be shared, there's going to be confidential information shared with you as board members. I have a responsibility to keep you informed. You're going to be given confidential information. It will almost always be noted that it's confidential information. If you share that confidential information, you, me, and everybody in this room can be held liable to that. And it gets very serious, okay? Our HR department, they work very hard to do a great job and keep our employees taken care of. There are some situations with 1,900 employees that we get, there's problems, and we try to work through that. I try to keep you informed as a board on those problems, and when I share that information, it is critical that information is not shared outside, and when it is, it can be a liability. I don't want to scare you with this liability piece, but I want you to also understand that individually as a board member, you can be sued. So you need to understand that responsibility as well. Okay, enough of the scary stuff. This is the fun stuff. Let me give you a little overview of Gadsden, because we have just a fabulous district. District 2, District 4, and District 5 are the three positions open in this coming election, okay? If you go to the next slide. We have 5 high schools, 3 comprehensive, Alta Vista Early College High School, and Desert Pride Academy is our alternative program. 3 middle school campuses. By the way, one of those middle school campuses is completely being rebuilt. Chaparral's in design, and ST's on its heels. And so in the next probably 6 years, you're going to have 3 brand new middle school campuses, all with 6th grade STEM academies for our kiddos. 14 elementary campuses and 4 pre-K centers. And like I mentioned earlier, the newest pre-K center, we will open the doors on that, I think in January of 2026. But as of the 5th, 11,315 students enrolled. We do have some challenges with enrollment. If I'm being really honest with you, we're watching a declining enrollment. For the last 14 years, Gadsden has seen a declining enrollment. That's the same for El Paso ISD. That's the same for Las Cruces Public Schools. That's the same for Socorro ISD. Everybody's seeing a declining enrollment. We have to make good, sound decisions in order to keep our budget healthy, keep our staff in a good place so that they feel secure, and make sure we're providing everything for our kiddos. You may have seen over the last couple years, we've done a couple school consolidations. Those were because of those declining enrollments. I anticipate additional conversations around the potential of school consolidations. Okay. Currently in those positions, we have Ms. Arlene Morillo in District 2, and that represents the Santa Teresa area. Recently appointed Ms. Guerrero in District 4, that's Anthony in that area. And then District 5, Ms. Flores, who is out in the Chaparral area. I want you to understand that these districts that the board members are broken were recently adjusted and changed a little bit. That's based on the population and the census, and you're trying to balance populations. So the reason why I bring that up on the Chaparral one, used to be Ms. Flores' district, District 5, was all of Chaparral. It's no longer true, okay? It's a larger portion of Chaparral, because Chaparral's growing. If you haven't been out to Chaparral, it's got some good growth in it. And Ms. Rodriguez, I'm trying to think, I think that's District 1, now represents a portion of Chaparral. So that was to balance the population, okay? Where are we at? Overview of campuses, students. You're looking at a map of District 2, 4, and 5. Those are the new ones there. And if you're unsure of your address, get in contact with me and we'll make sure that you know exactly where you're at and what those boundaries are. And when you think of your campaign, you're going to want to know exactly what those boundaries are. You don't want to spend time in areas that are not part of your district, right? Because those individuals are the ones voting for you. Okay, if you go to the next one, let's talk about that election process. Really important dates here. Election date is November 4th. The election is managed 100% by the county clerk. I'll help you here as much as I can, but you have to understand I have zero authority over the election process, okay? These local elections, I love this, that they're nonpartisan in nature. There is no party whatsoever. I really enjoy that about local elections, and I get really tired of ads, okay? So election ads are not something I enjoy. But if you need more information, again, there's a link on this presentation that is available on our website. Mr. Carmona can show you, and there it is. You can, all the information he's tried to put on one page on our website that can help you review this. This presentation is recorded. It'll be on our YouTube page so you can watch it again. So if you have questions, and you always can email one of us, we'll be happy to try to help guide you a little bit here. Okay, filing to run. So any individual that wants to file has to declare and has to submit what's called a declaration of intent must be filed in person on August 26, 2025, between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. at the county clerk's office. So you don't file it here, you have to file it at the county clerk's office. I can very easily give you the declaration of intent, but I recommend, and I'll get it to you if that's what you'd like me to do, I recommend you go to the county clerk's office to get it. Why? Because then you're going to know exactly where you drop it off on August 26th. So you're not unsure. If you haven't been to the county clerk's office, it's pretty big complex, and I'd really like you to know before you have to drop it off where you're going to drop it off. We'll get you a copy if that's easiest for you. It's no problem. But I encourage you, go get it there so you know, right? And then there's no, I would hate for someone to show up at 5:10 and not, or you show up at a few minutes before, but you can't find the right office, right? I don't want that to happen to anybody. Missing this deadline, though. This deadline is very important because you want your name to appear on the ballot. If your name doesn't appear on the ballot, that's called a write-in candidate. Okay, and that's a whole different process that you'll have to file at the county clerk's office as a write-in. You don't want that to happen, okay? So if you have questions, we'll try to help you with those, but remember, managed by the county clerk. Here's a real important part, and we talked about a little bit of this, and I tried to allude to it. Understanding that this is 5 people working as a team. When the board makes a decision, it might not be, at the end of the day, they've got to give me some unity. They've got to show me, Mr. Dempsey, we've had this conversation, we understand the facts of the situation, here's what we want you to do. Sometimes that ends, rarely here, but sometimes it ends in a little bit of a split vote. So at the end of the day, as a board member, I'm going to ask you, don't hold it against the superintendent. If you're on the side that you're the one out of 4, well, the superintendent has to follow those 4. That's where that team and collaboration comes together. Healthy disagreement is normal, and I'm going to suggest sometimes even good. We need to question things. I really think in public education, one of the mistakes we've made is we've been too content. We need to push, in my opinion, we need to push a little harder. And we may need to push on some of those traditional things that we think are the most important. And if they are, then they stay in place. If they're not, then maybe we need to make a change on some of those, right? Board member training. This is brand new, and it's just starting, but I want you to make sure you understand that there's a new process called school accreditation. Part of, there's 10 different pieces that we have to meet as a school and as a district. One of those is board member training. As a new board member, you're required to accomplish 10 professional development hours in a year, from January to January, or January to December. As a veteran, 5 annually. So it's 5 per year, not just 5 once, it's 5 per year. If you do not meet those, our schools do not get accredited. So they've really ratcheted this up. Now, like I mentioned, one of my struggles with this is conferences are not easy for everyone to go to. And so I volunteered as a pilot to try, and we're going to try something here in the next, actually probably the next month, to offer some training that would meet these requirements, and then you wouldn't necessarily have to go to those conferences. So we'll be working on that, and I think it's important to give people an option. Okay, talked about PD, campaign finance. Okay, this is another very important component. New Mexico statute includes mandatory reporting under the New Mexico School District Campaign Reporting Act. All candidates must file, even with 0 contributions or expenditures. So there's a website that as an individual board member, you have to get yourself set up on, get registered on, and then you have to report any dollars that were donated or given to help you campaign, even if there were none. And there's deadlines of October 14th and December 4th to file that. This must be completed by the individual candidate. This is not something I can do, my administrative assistant can do. It has to be done by the individual candidate. So we want to help you get set up on that website and then make sure you know those deadlines so that you get that filed. I believe there's a fine for every candidate that doesn't do that. So make sure that you go through that, okay? Some common pitfalls and ethics complaints, and again, there was a lot of AI in this presentation. So campaign rules, that's been a hiccup for board members. If you failed to submit that documentation online, there's fines with that, and it can impact you. When it deals with elections, there are very specific timelines around elections. So if someone wanted to contest an election, you only have a window to do so, okay? So you have to make sure you're within that window. This is all managed by the Secretary of State. This is not Mr. Dempsey. This is not the school district manage that. What I emphasize here is transparency, accurate record keeping are essential. That's that Open Meeting Act component. Go ahead, next slide. Voices from the boardroom. So we had asked our current board members if they would like us to share something that I think it was, the questions were, what were you surprised by most, and what advice do you have? And Mr. Carmona, I think we had someone submit, if you can read that.
We did, Mr. Dempsey. Ms. Claudia, board member Claudia Rodriguez kindly submitted the following. The question is, what surprised you most when you first joined the board? Her answer, a significant revelation for me has been the public's expectation of the board's capabilities, highlighting the need to trust frontline workers. Focusing on my responsibilities is crucial to stay within my purview, while respecting and supporting the expertise of others is key. To the question, what advice would you give someone considering this role? She answered, keep an open mind and prioritize student outcomes as the primary focus. And to the question, how do you balance the responsibilities of governance with your personal and professional life? She responded by saying, this commitment necessitates responsible and active engagement in board meetings, underscoring the need for regular attendance and meticulous advance planning. Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Carmona. We appreciate that. So that just gives you a little bit of feel of a current board member and some of the things that they've experienced, right? Next slide is just, I want to review that timeline with you, just to kind of, I'm trying to really emphasize those dates, right? August 26th, that's when you file your declaration of intent. October 14th is your deadline for the campaign finance, and then November 4th is voting day. We want you to get out and vote, and we want everybody around you in your community to get out and vote. And please help me. One of the things I would love to see in Gadsden District is increasing the percentage of population that's voting. One of the things that we struggle with sometimes, and I hear it a lot, is they don't really think about us down here in Gadsden, right? They forget about us, right? Well, if you want them to remember you, vote, because that will make the difference. If you see a big increase in the percent of our population voting, you will get the county's attention, you'll get the state level attention, you'll really get a factor. This is a great opportunity to register more people to vote and help them get that voice out there. So please do that. As a candidate, that is something that you immediately can have an impact on, is getting more and more people to vote. Set up those accounts. The deadlines on these are non-negotiable. So like that declaration of intent, 9 to 5, they're not, if you show up at 5:30, they're long gone, right? You're not going to get to file. So just watch those carefully. We also included, now those of you that are here with us, you have a packet, and I printed out, if you go to the next slide, Mr. Carmona, I printed out each of these items. So Board Member Ethics and Government Conduct Act, I printed that out for you. School Board Member Handbook, this is done by the New Mexico School Boards Association. The contact information for the county clerk's office and the address. And then our November 4th, 2025, it's called the Local School Election Calendar. And it breaks down all the deadlines in that. The biggest one, well, there's a couple there, but that August 26th is really important. October 14th is the first reporting deadline, and then November 4th again. So pay attention to those. The things I would emphasize to you is what a great opportunity to serve your community. I think there's so much value in these positions, and the impact you can make on children is enormous. I didn't specifically, because this is really county clerk, but just understand what it means to be a qualified voter in your district. So in districts 2, 4, and 5, you're supposed to reside there, okay? You have to live in those districts, okay? And then, can't remember the other piece of that. There's one other component of that. It has to be a requirement. But that's listed on the intent, right? And then I would love to take online people, anyone online virtually, you have those links. If you want to stop by the office here and get copies of these, we have a few extras. We'd love to give those to you. And then any questions or thoughts, or I hope I had no intention whatsoever of scaring anyone. What I really want to help you do is be successful. And so anybody have any questions for me? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Brenda Velasquez, and I have a question in regards to fundraising restrictions. Are there any?
Oh, fundraising restrictions. Absolutely. There's always rules around money. And so that would be in policy and in handbook, and every bit of that goes through our finance office and gets stamped for him. So do we do fundraising? We do a ton of fundraising. Are there rules with fundraising? Absolutely. And as a board member, you want to have rules with fundraising, because every year an auditor is going to show up, audit all of our books, and give you a report. And if there's problems with fundraising, they're going to note those problems.
Yes, they would be for the election process. I would like fundraising for.
Oh, fundraising for election.
the election.
So that's going to be under those campaign laws. And so what I would suggest is, what I do know is that can people donate to your campaign? Yes. Do you have to designate who donated and how much? Yes. So keeping records of any donations made to you individually is a requirement of the Campaign Reporting Act. So just if you're going through that, which you could be, make sure you're keeping really good records. And I would reach out to the Secretary of State to get good details on what that might look like. Other questions? Could be thoughts. Okay. Yeah, sure, Mr. Yeah.
So I have an interesting perspective from the back of the room. I'm in charge of the live streaming, so I think it's important to just keep in mind that you are on stage twice a month, and there are four cameras that get almost every angle, and yet all your audio is picked up. So it's just something that I'd like to point out, because if you're not comfortable with lights and cameras, you might want to reconsider.
Mr. Carmona, thank you for sharing. That's something new. Pre-pandemic, we didn't have all this. And then during the pandemic, we had to figure out how to still continue to operate at some level. And then post-pandemic, what happened, I think, and I actually appreciate this, is we got good at it. And now an expectation is we deliver these live streaming and online, which live streaming is now a statutory requirement in New Mexico. And so I actually think that's a really good thing. I think it upped the level of transparency, but you have to be thoughtful about being up here, how you choose to speak, and then I would encourage you to think about how, when you speak, it gets perceived, which is a trick. I mean, I make mistakes all the time, and I may say something I don't mean to sound grumpy or mean, but it may come off that way. So I have to be thoughtful, and Mr. Carmona does a great job of reminding me, hey, this is a happy moment, smile. I don't have that natural smile that some of you have, and so I have to use my voice to make it a little bit more welcoming and inviting, but you want to be thoughtful about those things, and I encourage you to practice. If you ever wanted, as a board member, you want to come in here and just we turn on all the mics and you get comfortable with the lights and all that stuff, I encourage you to do it because we want to help you. Because if you're successful, that's another member of our community that we're all being more and more successful. Anything else? Well, let me thank you so much for your time and your thoughts. And if I can help you, please don't hesitate to ask me, and have a terrific evening. And thank you so much.